Hi there, let us continue video 6. In the podcast series of Becoming a Changemaker, as well as the first 5 podcasts in this series of the tools of a chaos pilot, we have focused mainly on ourselves and our inner structure and what we need to accomplish alongside with the whole transition science classes, the advanced energy work and the template science courses. We have talked about all of the steps that we need to do to recreate and realign as much as our current inhuman enclosure type of personality matrix to the original versions of ourselves, because we've been many different versions on many different timelines and many different systems, but to derive the core essence of each and one of these prior experiences of existence, meaning the earlier selves we have had, and put it into a patchwork or a conglomerate or a make-up system of different approaches of what it means to be us and what our true purpose and function is, trying to cut to the core of who we have been in the different systems. What were the main reason we were there? What were we mainly working with? What was our grand purpose of existing there? What were we trying to achieve? How did we transform energy? And what was our main goal? Because this lose as saying that we are working to progress consciousness is of course what we're doing, but there are many different approaches to what that means and what is entailed in that. And it's all defined by the systems that we exist in. So we have these different experiences of existence within the different reality fields. And that's why when we talk about reality fields and we talk about progression, it's always about who and what we are energetically and consciously and what our purpose and function is. And we should be clear on that. So we always align ourselves with our core essence. But at the same time, we are also to express that around other similar life forms in that reality field. And I deliberately put it that way because it could be many different types of life forms, which we have not yet knowledge of, where we learn to express our specific core essence, our specific purpose and function in that system, among others, as a part of a group, but not necessarily a team. It doesn't necessarily have to be in some kind compassionate setting of higher advanced sciences where we are all best pals. It can also be an expression of self and core essence in an extremely hostile system. So we must learn that the whole value about we are only doing progression work and spiritual work if it's good and if it's kind and if it's compassionate. That is some of the blindsided or bias, you can call it bias, that we have been incorporated with inside this reality field. And I know, of course, there are lineages that prefer only to be on the right-hand path, so to speak, only want to be in the love and light, only want to produce light, and only want to elevate via the principles of true progression, law, harmony, and order. And that was some of the issues that we had in the original progressive realms, where you could say the ones that chose to go into the LPU, they might have had some need somehow from a previous cycle or a previous universal system, the need to explore something else a little bit different. And of course, that slipped into what we know as the extreme dark path, which were helped along with the timeline event. So there are, what we could say, there's always a driver behind whatever we're doing. And that's what we're looking for when we look into all the different personalities we have had and the levels or the different beings of existence, or whatever that means, we have had in the different systems. So we are in that understanding when we work with this and when we work as both as change makers and chaos pilots, that we have ourselves, which we need to be in check of first. That's the first most important step. The second one, and that is to learn to align ourselves with our core purpose and function, and by that express our core consciousness features, so that no matter where we are, no matter what system we're in, we are always expressing our true self, if you want to put it that way, whatever that is, because the true self is changeable, all depending on what feature that we are choosing to work with in whatever reality we exist. So therefore, it's not a fixed true self. It's not something that is unchangeable. It changes all the time. Similarly, as your personality structure changes inside this life, the more experiences you get, the more you adapt, the more you change, the more you should hopefully progress into become a more mature person. that is looking at others and reality in more and more mature ways that are less and less centered around yourself and your own needs and your own desires, and more slip into, okay, can I actually give something back to others, give something back to society? And that's the trinity we're working within: self, others, and reality. And that's very important. And I think that's a more important trinity than the Godhead and the Son and the Holy Ghost. But that's just been used that way within Christianity, because we are based upon trinity systems. We have it in all ancient religions. They have that trinity structure in some version or modality. So therefore Christianity has just thieved, taken that one from prior religions, and so did the Jews, and so did the Baals, and etc., etc. So there's nothing new there. So what's the origin of it? We work with the Trinity as well in the whole transition science classes. We also have it as the Friedrich Hegel, the German or from Switzerland, philosopher, that talked about how these two oppositions create synergy. And he nailed it. From my perspective, that's what it means. You have two different forces that work together to create the top level, that is synergy or transmutation, that lifts everything into its highest potentials. The ancient Greeks had the same idea, so it's not that Frederick, he came up with some grand idea nobody had thought of before, but there are in each cycle, as it's called in Hebrew. I don't know why I suddenly came up with that one. In each section, in each era, there are always thinkers that are catching up the original ideas of our system, the dynamics that governs our system. And our system is based upon what we call the Bailey material, called the strive via crisis to create harmony. And what we are here interpreting it is that life, ourselves, and what we are dealing with, and who and whatever comes our way. If we look aside from the prohibiting technologies, inserted technologies, and whatever is going on, it's kind of a little bit messing that up. But if we were to look in what we call perfect state scenario, where everything were as they were supposed to be, we would be using the crisis to demolish and take away all the things that are no longer useful for us. Meaning that once or when we're not using energy correctly, when we're not in alignment with our true core essence, we generate distortion. And that distortion makes our energy system and our physicality rigid, which if it does not get cleared, it will then go into entropy or chaos. It will then go into destruction and devastation. So therefore, when there is a crisis, that is an opportunity to work with the original opposition forces of what we want and what is happening around us, principle 4, whether it is other people or it is reality itself. And first, it will be mirrored by other people. And later on, it will be mirrored by reality as we expand our consciousness awareness. So therefore, as we are expanding our reality awareness, that's, if you want to say, well, when I'm working as I'm working, I'm both working with what I need to do to maintain myself and keep myself in balance and work through the crisis I experience, because I know it is what we could call a patchwork of inner and outer energetic and genetic affinities. Sometimes I get things in my way that's not mine, but I'm being modified to carry it. And then I deal with it, even though it's not mine, because it's in my field. It's been put there. So we can't just say, this is just about me and my genetics, and I'm not going to deal with anything else, because we are living in a system of influences, energetically and genetically speaking. And all of that is an opposition. Some of it is in alignment with who we are, and then it will support us. Other stuff will be in opposition, and therefore be the invitation for transformation into a higher potential learning process where we will develop into progression. And that's what, when we do the evaluation of our scenarios, is to see, is this something that has supported who and what I am, so I have grown stronger in my core essence and my understanding of who and what I am, and by that it's easier for me to define what I am and what I'm not, because that's part of the rediscovery of self. What am I and what am I not? And then weed away, either via crisis or by our own means, what is no longer us. We could do it in a crisis. That is, when we're too slow, it develops into a crisis. That means the distortion energies have grown too big. And therefore, the reality or self or others will create that crisis. Sometimes we actually instigate it subconsciously because we're drowning in that energy network entanglement that we have got ourselves into, especially when we talk about other people. Reality is another matter. It works a little bit different. But when we talk about other people, we can have these internal crises. We often feel them first as something is off inside ourselves. And some people are good at responding to that, clear out the distortion, and then figure out, okay, what's the root of this not feeling comfortable in whatever's going on here? What's the cause of it? Is it energetic parasites? Is it technology? Or is it just that person, even though we still like that person, we're not ready to let go of that person, we are feeling more and more discomfortable around that person because we are moving ahead energetically speaking, and that person is perhaps not moving in the same direction, and therefore the segregation dynamics begins to kick in. And if we, by our human belief system, cling on to that other person, we will create more and more distortion because our energy system is telling us, you need to move on now. It's time for you to move on because you have progressed, you have developed in a different direction. But our human emotionality and our core beliefs of how we are supposed to cling together for the rest of our lives will keep us in that pattern, in that relationship. And it's not that I am saying we have these dysfunctional males and females that are literally like butterflies flying from flower to flower and never really settles. That's not what I'm talking about here, because there are dynamics that are functional and are correct progression dynamics. And then there's always the perverted version of them that are being used in a negative way, which is hurtful and are causing harm to other people. So we need to figure out how to do this the right way. And this is some of the things I want to talk about here in the last series of the videos in Becoming, or the tools of a Chaos Pilot, is the correct partnership as well as the inner knowledge. We kind of worked our way through the inner knowledge, and this is where we're summing up the inner knowledge into, okay, what does that actually mean? And that's what I'm doing here. And then we're jumping into correct partnerships, because we're really, when we begin, if we do become change makers, we will work with others. And there we must learn the dynamics. Okay, how are we progressive humans around others that might not progress in the same direction, or are regressing, or are deliberately working against us? And that's some of the reasons why I brought in some of the negative patterns and negative entities, because humans have these. And we might team up with people, as I experienced in Australia. That's some of the things I want to discuss in the evaluation of the correct partnerships of what I was attempting to do in Australia. It's nothing to do whether we like that person or not. It's all to do with the reality we are part of and the factions that are here. And that's the biggest difficult thing, because you might have all the potentials with a person, but if that person is under some sort of imprisonment contract or enslavement contract that person has not freed himself or herself of, there's absolutely nothing you can do. It's like trying to create a solid business with one that is tied up to the mafia. So just so you kind of get the understanding, it doesn't matter whether you like that person or not. It has nothing to do with love and friendship and human entanglement, emotionally speaking. This will not suffice when we begin to talk about entering into the fifth cycle and into the galactic communities we're getting ready for. None of these species, especially in our system, has anything that compares to human quote unquote love and friendship. And to be honest, even though it is a beautiful concept and it is originally built upon what we call the Kalakar code, so we could approach each other without chopping off each other's heads, which were some of the issues that were the core results of the third cycle. And we created the Kalakar code to create some kind of diplomacy, to create some kind of a proximity approach mechanism where we could take the segregation dynamics and put them in a box for a while, and then approach each other to try and find solutions. And again, there we really came into the correct partnership issues, which I'm going to talk about here, because we're going to replay that one. We failed that one. We failed it in Atlantis. That's one of the reasons why things fell apart in Atlantis. So there are replays of our karmic history as a joint race on this planet and beyond. So it's not just a simple matter of things that we all just need to be compassionate beings and everything will be good and fine, because that is the utopia that has very little root in reality and practicality, which it can be exemplified in different variations, but not the way the love and light community think it is. As I keep saying, if you're in front of a predator, you can't do the love and light sitting in your light bubble, try to pretend that that thing is not there. It will chew you up, it will eat you. So you need some different mechanisms. And you can't do your own Buddhist warrior approach where you become invisible, energetically speaking, for that creature, because that creature will then go out and chew up someone else. So that is kind of what you say. A magician knows how to cloak himself or herself. So that's very selfish, because you can't let that predator run loose in the reality field you're part of. It will harm others and will harm eventually the reality field you're part of. So we have a responsibility here. It's not just about choosing a mechanism that will keep us safe, which is also whenever people are asking me, do you use protective spheres? What type of light do you use when you create that sphere around you, when you're around harmful things? And I am of that, because I'm a warrior and I'm a scientist. So I'm of at that approach that I say, well, if I encounter things that are harmful, I make sure that it stops being harmful. I'm transforming it so that if it's a big troll, it becomes a little cat. And then I'll look at the cat and then I'll see, okay, what did you used to be? What are your original purpose? And then recreate it into its original holographic features, from where it can then realize if you want to move on or if you want to stay. And if you want to stay, well, then that type of genetics will kind of still be released, because they are no longer functional in an entire form, so to speak, and therefore they must move on, even though they still want to progress. But then what is the right system for that type of genetics? So that's part of my core essence in my job as well, to figure out, okay, what lineage did you come from? What are your possibilities now? And how can we find a solution to your current situation? So I'm doing that all around on the inner levels as well as on the outer levels. There is no discord between what I'm doing energetically and holographically with the true progression dynamics and the way I live my life in the base program outer reality settings. It's the same method all the way around. And that's also a type of alignment. So core essence is here, what we are dealing with is that we have self, others, and reality. And that's part of when we have learned to master ourselves to the degree where we are in alignment, inner and outer, that we are coherent to 80% degree, because nobody's perfect. Coherent as much as possible with our inner purpose and function and core essence, and what we do in the outer. And that's part of the systemic, dynamic business model that I want to go into in the next course. That's why I'm beginning to slowly bridge us into others as partnerships, because when you do business, you are getting into partnerships. It's all about partnerships. Of course, it's also about reality. That's kind of the top goal, but it's an easy peasy one. It's just say, yeah, we need to do a kind of business that first and foremost is in alignment with our core self and true purpose and function. Express that into some kind of adaptable, similar type of business inside this reality. So we are in alignment and we are coherent. And then, of course, it must be for the highest progression rate of the reality field we are part of. So the business that we must make must be some kind of transformative business. So that's kind of easy peasy. But what that is, when we go deeper down to, okay, how can we then apply that and express that? Because that's just the dynamics. But how can we express these dynamics into a practical business model and a practical type of business? And that's what we're going to look into in course 3. And then we move into reality itself, where we kind of say, okay, I've done the business part. So how do we then look into the system that we are part of? And that's the large system of the galactic realms, where our business, if we are doing the progression work at the same time, will become part. It is part of a system, not just about what we call markets within the base program, but also trade systems with alien races, because that's how far up we should go when we talk reality incorporation as a system into our business model. So that's also part of what we're doing here. I know it sounds very grand and it's just preliminary and not all of the solutions are there, because as with everything, an idea must be formed into a system of thought. It must be put into some kind of complex system, which is a developmental program. And then that must be expressed via entities or different groups of people, or exemplified into the reality we are part of. And there it will show if it can carry water or if it's going to fall apart. So that's what we're dealing with here. So it's not that when we work as change makers, or when we are navigating through the chaos of the threats of the environment that we are part of in our business model and in our projects, there are these foundational core essences that we can take with us, and then we must adjust and adapt and evaluate and figure out, okay, what is possible, what's not possible, what can be done, what is not possible to be done, and then cut these things loose before they create so much distortion that we get ourselves so entangled that a crisis is needed to get us free of that energetic dysfunction. So that's important to understand, that if we don't understand the dynamics of transformation and opposition, then we will get ourselves into a situation where the only way we can cut ourselves loose is the hard way, and that's a crisis. And the crises are always uncomfortable, because that's where we either emotionally explode into some kind of irrational being, or we harm others, or a situation arises where all our business partners pulls out and we are left with nothing, and then we have to close down our business and leave our home or whatever, instead of nipping it in the bud, seeing the trends and the patterns that leads to the crisis. So we kind of get, oh yeah, I can sense there is a higher level of distortion of energies. What's the root? What's the cause? How do I clear it? Can it be cleared? And if it cannot be cleared, what do I need to cut loose? What is then dysfunctionally not working correct with my core essence and my core function? Because that's what will create distortion. If you are going against who and what you are foundationally speaking, you could call it being really authentic, having your true self expressed, or the versions of your true self that are functional inside this reality expressed into your personality matrix as skills, then you will, if that's not working inside reality and you have huge resistance towards it, what are the causes of this resistance? Not just because the others are screwed up or possessed by dark entities or what have you. That's one level of it. But there is also that perhaps it's premature. Perhaps you're trying to push something that reality is not ready for yet. You want to do fourth dimensional integrative healing or psychology or what have you, but the base program is still solidified in the old world order where that was not allowed. Of course, it was within the guise of spirituality, but you understand the context here. So we need to learn these patterns of change, as in kind of when we really want to create a pattern of change that's large, we have to work step by step. We have to be patient. It takes time. It takes an enormous amount of time to work our way through all of the hoops and the loops of what that complex information system is, so that we build it up slowly like a neural network with all of the little bits in order, so that the holographic pattern itself, once it's ready to be launched, will be so intricate and so covering all bases of what needs to be covered that reality itself responds to its complexity and says, yes, this is in alignment with my original purpose and function, which is our reality. Saying that literally because there is actually a huge construction and program behind it, even though most of it is not functioning correctly. I'm from time to time getting high enough in energy in the sixth dimension where I can approach mother and work with her, and she's not in a good state. And then I'm being targeted and pushed down because nobody wants me to go up and repair her, because if she rebooted, she would begin to bring us back into the elevational cycles on her own. And since I'm not allowed to do that, then we have got the opposition of that one. That's the planetary activation side, because nobody is maintaining the original program, the original construction. And therefore, mother is reaching out and nobody's responding, and I'm not enough. Me alone is not enough. we need at least 10% of the original human population to do so. And therefore, Mother reaches her coding that says if nobody's responding to the elevation cycles that are going on, because she responds to the dynamics of the system she's part of, then we are not responding to it. And then she concludes via her programming and the original settings she has, nobody's alive anymore. And therefore she begins the closing down. And hence she responded, once the sun closed down, she got that kick that says, yes, that's it. There are no higher level beings left. The system and the purpose of this system has now ceased to exist, because the sun was density 2, and that was the humanoid races. And that was in alignment with what we understood to be the grand purpose of the LPU. And as that one shut down and the humanoids left, well, then she is literally detecting, she can't detect this enclosure because it's in the frequency and it is made deliberately so under different types of alien technologies. So she's just scanning the original LP of 1 or density 1 reality field, and there's nobody there. So therefore she is, with the sun closing down and with nobody there and no living beings at all in her reality field, she has begun the closing down sequence, which is our planetary activation cycle. That's that simple. And trust me, I have talked with many of the different groups here as in kind of, why don't you just let me get in there and do the work I need to do with a group of people? But this is so scary for the ones that have worked with the different races, because they know, well, then the potentials are that we will take over this reality field and then they will lose their investments and their genetics and what have you. So that's the problem. So that's the problem with working with mafia and the ones that wants to have power and the wrongful use of energy and genetics. That is that they are simply not rational beings that are looking into the correct solutions. They are looking into these. They are rational, but they are looking into this within the cloaking of maintaining power, maintaining position, maintaining what they have conquered and what they have colonized and what they have contracts of and what puts them into a position of their current power position. They're not willing to let that one go. And that's also why compassion is not going to work in this one. Those of you who just say, we just need to be compassionate. Yeah, you're just compliant when you're like that. With these beings and these guys, you can't just be compassionate. They will just run you over from A to Z. And that's, again, I know the ideology of compassion as the Buddhists have tried to do inside of reality. And they had originally a purpose with it. Seeding or what you call it, anchoring what we could call some of the ancient technologies of the old world order that kept the balance and kept out the abyss. But that technology has broken down, and the planetary hierarchy is gone, and all of that is off. It's no longer functional. So these monks that are still running around, that's one of the reasons, if you ask me, that's my opinion, one of the reasons why they're being hunted down now and why the Chinese are literally taking everything over with these lineages is because they no longer have that purpose or that function. And that compassionate streak, although still influential and still a good moral, ethical, human way of being, the purpose of it is gone. It was to seed a specific type of light coding into the reality grid. And that purpose is gone. And that's why everything's falling apart. So the next generation of Tibetan monks and the next incarnation of the Dalai Lama lineage main piece of technology. Sorry about that. You hear my voice kind of, I'm not allowed to say that. Which it is. It's something that is, okay, I'll just shut and one down. I'll get into trouble if I talk about that. So let us get back to, let's close that one down. Let's get back into, so we kind of round up the first courses or the first podcast in this course with the inner knowledge, because we talked about that in the previous video. We talked about the threats that we are having, and we are now understanding that, but we are not to be controlled by it. We are to be rational, logical, strategic beings that understand we have these entities, we have these beings, we are observant of it, but we're not going to make it determine the way we work. We're not going to go into a frenzy of fear and whatever. We're just saying this is a fact. This is what we're dealing with. Similarly, as we're going to have in the future, and human within the base program will get more and more accustomed to live in areas where wildfires is there from time to other. They will learn to build better houses. They will learn not to build close to to great forests that can go into a wildfire. They will learn how to administer water supply. They will learn that perhaps I can't take a bath every day, but every second day. They will learn that, okay, how do I work with the limitations in water resources? So I'm not using drinking water to do my dishes, which is ridiculously stupid. It is beyond. Seriously, get that one in check. And if you can say, well, there's no rainwater, well, then take seawater and adapt it into some kind of water you can do your dishes in, etc., etc. Flushing the toilet with drinking water. What the fuck? Could we please get some solutions that are taking into consideration that nothing is abundant in this system anymore? It's changing. And with that, the overpopulation and 8 billion people flushing the toilets with drinking waters. Of course, I know in Thailand they don't have the same thing, but let's just go with that one. Seriously, let us find some different solutions. So that's just a logical, simple, quick fix solution. Yes, they cost a lot, but in the long run, we need to invest in these solutions so we kind of have drinking water and are learning to take good care of our drinking water. So, and with that also going into, we have these huge ponds that are out in the open where different countries are tapping their drinking water from, especially in Australia, or some of these big lakes. And in all of these lakes, there are humongous crafts, and the drinking water in Australia is infected with alien genetics. And that's one of the things I discovered while I was in Australia, which is, anyways, I'm just going to let that one, just slipping that one there and not going deeper into detail with that, because this is some of the things when we begin to really understand the challenges of those of us who are going to make it into the future and figure out, okay, how are we going to deal with these kind of things? We're going to have physical, environmental, life, experiences that are going to work against everything we have been accustomed to. We have been in the little, what we call Goldilocks zone for a very long time, and we are moving out of that one. And we'll just learn to adjust. That's what humans do. And we'll learn to deal with it. We'll learn to live that way and find it's okay. Okay, I can't do a bath every day. Yeah, I might be a little bit smelly, but I can do it tomorrow. And then we also know that as we don't wash ourselves every day, the hair gets accustomed to not being washed every day, or we'll find solutions to just learn to say, yeah, we kind of know we're all in the same situation. So your hair might be a little bit less nice to look at, but this is the situation we're in. It's either that or no drinking water. So let us find solutions that we begin to drain the seawater, because we're going to have a lot of melting ice. So we're going to have a rise in the water, the sea levels that are going to be a problem. So let us begin harnessing the water, transform it and use it to flush our toilets and use it to do our dishes in, and then preserve the drinking water for drinking water only, as well as when we take baths. We can do that kind of transformed type of waters. Just need to wash out the soap and what have you, desalinize it. Then it's functional, it works, and it can be cleared, and it can be purified through different types of frequency, gamma ray blasting technologies, as they are already using on the drinking water they are getting from the lakes to get rid of the microbial life forms that are there. So everything's possible. Then you say, well, what about all the animals in the ocean? We need to preserve them too. Yeah, well, that we are slowly killing these species. So 10 years time, our oceans will have very little life in it. So we might as well just get started with that solution. Okay, so going into the inner knowledge, what I want to just round up, because we began in the previous podcast with that the true core skills and our talents are in our genetics. And in the whole philosophy book, we are on page 240 there. I talk about principle 5 and principle 6. And I want to round this inner self-understanding, inner work, because I think with all the course material I made so far, we covered most of the basis of the inner work. The rest you can discover in sessions with me or in your own meditation, inner clearing work. You will discover who and what you are. So if you kind of need sparring with me, you do that in some kind of whole session. And if you can do it on your own, that is just as good and fine, because I've done it all on my own, so to speak. I have not had anyone really to talk to, because you kind of know I work in mysterious ways. So therefore, what I've seen and what I experience is mine and mine alone. And that's the quote unquote burden I bear because of who and what I am. But the more I get in alignment with my true core self, the less I need others. Not that I get into an isolated position where I feel alone and miserable, because I don't. I never did. But part of the fifth cycle is having this, what you kind of call, you have the self in the middle, and then you have the perimeter around you, which you administer. And therefore, in your mastery, you learn to operate by your own means and by your own inner drivers and by your own core essence. You are never alone, because you're always in company with all of your levels of selves, as well as all of who and what you have been, including all of the energetic entities, as well as the reality you're part of. The loneliness is part of the enclosure program. The loneliness is part of being in the under the control of the emotional and the mental field, and the programs that are running that drives you to be around other people, so that the reality program that keeps us enslaved are kept running, meaning that we are constantly affecting each other and influencing each other with distortion energy. That's what all of that program is about, if you ask me. But if you rise above and you learn to work progressively, you will understand that you are absolutely not alone. Even though I am here in my own apartment and I haven't seen people for many days, I can hear people on the street. I can sense the other people living in the other houses around me. I sense the planet. I sense the universal structure. I sense the entire universe of races. I can expand my consciousness into the past, where I can see previous versions of whatever. You say, well, it's just like memories. No, it's actually very interactive. If I like, I can reconnect with some beings, if I like, in some other dimensional setting, have a little bit of conversation there. And you say, well, it's just in your mind. That's kind of what people get crazy of. But for me, it's not. It's just, I'm never alone. Loneliness has never been something I suffered from. Why? Yes, if I compared myself to the base program, what other people were doing, I kind of fell a little bit off there. And as I was younger, that was a little bit troubling, right? Because there I didn't know what I know today. But today I'm just saying, well, I've arranged myself in a way. I have an interface system others can recognize, and by that will respond to positively, which is good. That's good. The interface system is good. We need to have a front that other people can relate to if we are to be in contact with these people. But the matter of the fact is, it's just an interface system, because this is not my reality. I'm working towards everything else. And it's not that it's difficult to explain. You need to understand it yourself. Once you get there, once you get beyond the perimeter of your enslavement program, you will understand what I'm talking about, because there you will understand. We're never alone. We're always interconnected. So we're interconnected to self, others, and a great reality field and beyond. So we are not alone. Loneliness is not a feature of the fifth cycle. Even though we choose to work as on our own, we are never alone, because we are always responsibly connected to everything around us. Everything is energy. We are made of energy, and therefore we are always in contact with everything. So the principle 5, inner knowledge is the correct teacher. I think I've really nailed that over and over and over again in many different angles. But here we are working within the context of the chaos pilot as well as the changemaker. And the foundational principle is the inner knowledge. We have principle 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I've worked my way through in the whole transition science classes. And principle 1, 2, 3, and 4 are technically to look into avoid the distortion situation, the crisis situation. You have these first 4 principles where you understand and you see everything in the perspective of it. So you avoid the entanglement, you avoid the distortion energies, you avoid the crisis that then pushes you into a different position. You learn to work with the principles and the first 4 rules of engagement in a manner so that you will not come into that situation where you have to have a crisis to get you out of entanglement. And just for the sake of it, you can look at that up as well in the whole philosophy book, the 12 rules of engagement. I work with that in the transition science classes. But just here to sum it up, correct self-mastery. We acknowledge that all is energy and that energy is interconnected. We are life forms with different states of energy. Energy is utilized in our thoughts, our emotions, and in the organic processes of the body. of the body. Sorry about that. We affect other life forms with the energies we hold in the template, in the mind field, the emotional field, and the organic field. And lastly, these energies affect the racial grids, polluting the life force. We must educate ourselves to again understand all this energy, all these forces, and all these powers. That's the mastery where we really learn to work with the energies of our system. And that's one of the core rules as a change maker. I know I talked about that I wanted to do inner knowledge is a correct teacher, but let us do with the rules of engagement here so you kind of get that, so you understand. I will return to them again when I begin to put it into evaluation process of some of the experiences I had in Australia, especially when we begin to talk about creating business. There, the rules of engagement becomes very, very important, because the rules of engagement are there when we begin to move beyond ourselves and begin to learn to work with others. So the otherhood of our trinity are part of the rules of engagement. The principles are all about ourselves, but the rules of engagement is all about the others. And then 2, self-correct responsibility, 3, correct self-expression, and 4, correct self, sorry, I'm looking at my paper here. Containment, correct self-containment. I'll look into that one because that's going to be important when we talk about partnerships and businesses. There, the rules of engagement really come into play. So let us resume and go back to the principles. Again, the rules of engagement are part of the whole philosophy book as well. And I talked about them many places. I'm here looking at the material I have printed out from other places. We also have the 12 natural laws of energy utilization, where we understand that the first law is the law of energetic influence, the law of proximity and counterbalance, the law of creational projection and amplification, and the 4th law is the law of correct feedback and reciprocity. And then we have the 5th law, the law of the higher and the lower order sciences. And that is where we have the correct teacher. Now you begin to understand how they work in Trinity systems. And I'm working with that in the transition science classes as well as in the template science classes, where I really go in and say, okay, technically there's not a principle without a rule and without a law. They are tied together in that Trinity structure. And it's tied together with the principles of self, rules of others, and the laws of the reality field. So really, when you really work on that 3-step rocket, you understand this is what you need to look into. Okay, I now have nailed the inner knowledge. It's the correct teacher. That's myself. How is that applied to the surroundings? When we talk about the rule 5, that is correct team awareness, where you kind of say, well, your inner knowledge is not worth much unless it's mirrored up against or played out against others as part of, okay, what I have achieved? What is the highest good of the many? What is the team awareness of that one? And then later on, when we have developed that skill with others and mastered that one, then we expand it into the understanding of the law of the higher and the lower order sciences that we then can apply to the reality field. That's the programs, the developmental programs that are part of the 511 pillar. So the inner knowledge is the correct teacher here, the principle. So this principle pulls in the information stored in the code sheets and the energy fields in our template. The quality and quantity of the information depends on what pillar template structure we have and the developmental programs we have been part of. That will energetically determine our inner knowledge and what we attain from within. All content has to be investigated and looked upon with the goal of becoming the best version of what we can be and what needs to be done to get there. Not all we hold are for the highest good of the many, and that is the test. What carries water is when we begin to do the correct team responsibility, when we understand we have a responsibility for the humans, whether we are in contact with them or not. And therefore, we're never alone. We are always part of a group, whether it's there physically representative in our reality or in our lives, or it's part of the system that we exist in. We coexist within the same system, so we have responsibility for it. And if people could get beyond that and understand it's not about their own little navel and themselves and their own little bodies and everything that's centered around their own personal lives, they will discover that they are a part of a system, and everything they are will affect the system they are part of. As we talked about with the rules of engagement, and rule number 1, everything is energy. And that's part of the correct self-responsibility too. with the rule number 2, correct self-responsibility. In acknowledging we affect everything by what we are energetically, be it humans, animals, plants, and the world that we live in, we must take responsibility for our energetic state. We agree to take the energetic challenge of becoming harmless, which means not to directly harm, disrupt, or distress whatever we interfere with. Unless, of course, the whatever attacks us, then we are to defend ourselves appropriately. That's also taking responsibility. In this, we accept that all disruptive belief systems and emotional patterns we might have from this and previous lives must be cleared and managed in accurate ways, along with the distorted cellular construction we call our body. So that's also part of being a chaos pilot. We acknowledge these things. That's why I keep saying, well, you are in this humongous chaotic situation and you're thinking, what to do? Well, if you have it on your backbone, so to speak, it's completely integrated to you that all is energy, all is interconnected. First, step 1. Step 2, you have a responsibility for self and others by you managing who and what you are energetically. So first step is, of course, to clear yourself or figure out, is it mine or is it coming from someone else? And then if you can really say, because you've done the clearing work, it's not coming from me, it's coming from someone else. How do you then deal with that one? And that's where the rules of engagement also comes in, as in kind of later down the line, you're also looking into what we call the laws of the reality. That's part of determining what you are to do with whatever comes your way. You know the whole kind of energetic influence. Okay, what's influencing me? And there you can go to principle 1 and say, okay, principle 1 tells me to do unto others, literally what I want them to do unto me, but it is only behave as we want others to behave. So principle 1, the principle leads to a higher self-responsibility, energetically, mentally, emotionally, along with what we call the higher order observances in speech, behavior, and emotional response to what is put in front of us. We behave as we want others to behave. We act as role models for what we want in the world. So it's also called the law of the one. So if one can do that, others can do that too. That's everything we do allow is an allowance for others to do it as well. So we better sharpen up and be sure that whatever we do is actually for the highest good of the many. So let us put it this way. Should we allow predators and negative aliens that are harvesting us to be allowed to exist in this universal realm? Of course not. Principle 2 kicks in there. Respond will equal energy and consciousness. The principle gives the answer of how to interact with humans and other life forms, not doing the progression work. We respond to their level of awareness and only give them what they can hold of energy. If we give them more information and energy than they can hold, the chances are high of activating levels in them which they are not ready to deal with. In doing so, the feedback to our energy system will be that we are not ready either to hold that awareness because we cannot administer it yet. You don't throw pearls at pigs. Simple as that. The principle also allows for actions that can be looked for in our encounters with the other dimensionals. Moreover, it sets the standards for the dealings with humans used as a tool to harm us. So that's also important. When you have a person, no matter how much you like them, if they have in the 8th dimension an Orion alien invasion technology that is literally wearing you out and wiping you clean and distorting you and dismantling your mental field, perhaps you shouldn't be around that person no matter how much you love that person. Perhaps you should let that person go and say, you know what, I truly, really like you, but there are things in you that I am simply not working well with, and you can explain it, and then you will probably have a very negative response because people don't like to hear that. Or you can just say, well, I'm pulling myself out of this equation because I'm kind of working in a different way with value systems or whatever is true within the base program. You have to tailor a story that is suitable for them, not the lying, it's me, it's not you kind of thing, because it's clearly not that way, but you have to figure out a way to share that information with other people so that they understand, so they won't feel harmed by it, especially if they don't do the progression work. If they do the progression work, you can be completely honest with them and say, you know what, you've got parts of your energy system you have absolutely no control of. And this is what I perceive. And then people can say, well, you're off, you're seeing it wrong. That's a projection. That's your own stuff. You're seeing it me. You're just perceiving what you hold in me. And therefore they're kind of giving you hands up, talk to my hand. And they say, okay, good, fine. Well, at least we have come to terms with this. So that's a crisis, less nice. But that's also kind of completing that relationship, saying, yeah, you're doing one thing, I'm doing another thing, and we have different approaches to how this is done. So perhaps we best should go each in our way. But by the way, if you ever should come around and feel that my system is the way you want to work alongside with as part of the correct partnership, because we can't be correct partners if you foundational feel that I'm wrong in my assessment and I feel foundational you're wrong in your assessments, we are not correct partners. It's not just about let us agree to disagree. Because when we talk alien technology, we're talking shit effects that we will have on each other if we don't separate and let go and do that in a way that causes as little crisis as possible. If we're talking really dark shit, then the crisis is inevitable. It will be with a big kaboom, because the goal of that technology is to cause harm, is to create crisis, and is to create pain and suffering. So therefore, when we're dealing with these forces, then we'll just have to suck it up afterwards, evaluate, clear ourselves out, learn to live with the pain, make sure it doesn't grow into a big energetic parasitic snake. Because that's what happens when you are too long in pain and suffering. It leads to depression. And with that, the dark forces can enter using their energetic parasites. Most of the time I talk about the fourth dimensionals that are linked up to the Sirian Ace and the fourth cycle dynamics. But the dark forces there have similar technology in the third cycle, and that's run by AI, and that's nasty. You don't want to go there. That is kind of a point of no return if you get sucked into that entanglement. So we only focus on what we want to amplify. But that's also the low participation. What we focus on, look at, perceive, join, read, watch, etc., we connect to energetically, and then we participate in the relative reality behind that information. This changes our energy settings, the code layers of the template, and it allows for the use of our energies to amplify regressed realities, their thought forms within this world, and the progressives naturally. So once we have detected what we are dealing with, and that's why some of the old world order program, positive thinkers, love and light communities chose to be on the right path, literally not focusing on the left-hand path, not focusing on it at all, and just pretend if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. There's an elephant under my carpet or a huge creature in my living room, but if I don't look at it, it doesn't exist. And I'll just sit in my light bubble and then I will not interfere with it. But it's still there. It hasn't gone away. So you kind of say, yeah, that's perhaps a protective mechanism when you have technology that upholds and blocks it with the astral barrier and the frequency fence. But once these things fall apart, then the abyss comes in and it's here and it's around us. So you can no longer ignore that huge turd that is in your living room, or the elephant or the monster or whatever's going on. So we are in a different setting now. So we have to learn to work with principle 3, responsible in a way that we understand that we are not looking at it, working with it, investigating it so we get more of it. We can do that until we know what we're dealing with, but then we transform it. Then we make sure it ceases to exist. And that is the difference between the old world order approaches to these things. They were trying to ignore it, turn the other cheek, pretend it was not there. And if I just go high up in energy, it will probably dissipate over the course of time. But we are in a different situation now. Shit has hit the fan, the bombs are falling around our ears, and all of these kind of things. And then you really need to learn to look at what you're dealing with and then not shy away from it, but confront it, transform it, transmute it, get rid of it. At least that is my approach as a releaser. That's what I'm doing constantly all the time. It's in my bones. It's in who and what I am. I'm not just looking at it, pretending, oh, it's not there. I am dealing with it as it confronts me. And of course that I'm drawing more in of the same type of energy because I have it in my energy system. It's now part of me. So they know they can come to me. They know when they're done with the dark wells, they come to me so I can release them. And that's a shitty piece of work. But same as people that are clearing our sewer or whatever, someone has to do the dirty work, right? We can not all of us can sit in our high tower of purity and compassion and pretend that all the dirt and the zombies and whatever's running around the streets does not exist. Just to put it in context, right? So that's what, when we talk about functional, mature humans that we are to grow into. For me, the whole kind of pretending things that are not there perhaps was a strategy that worked a while back, but it doesn't work anymore. So we need to adapt that strategy. The threats of our system have changed, and therefore we must change too. We must adapt to the circumstances and develop new strengths and new ways of working with this reality we have now become part of if we want to deal with it, as in transform it. So that's part of the goal of the transformative energy system, which were the original idea to begin with. This whole kind of pretending it's not there just makes it grow into a huge collective of negative energy, which it has. So that's what that strategy has led to. And that will what it will continue to lead to. And we'll have people that have done the love and light their entire lives. And when they die and they really get to understand that the top levels of their energy systems completely taken over, they will get a new life where they will be sucked dry and they will become something entirely else. I've said that one before. And that's so sad because foundationally these people want to do good. But they end up understanding, because they're not using the correct laws and the correct principles and the correct rules of engagement, that their method, their strategy has just led them down a rabbit hole where they are now defenseless because they don't know how to deal with these things. They haven't learned to transform energy. They have not learned to master the reality they're part of. They have learned to master one section, but not the entire pattern. So that is one of the things that we are going to work with. And I want to continue in the next video where we begin to look into, again, I will refer to the principles and the rules and the laws, working with these in practical settings, not as much just around ourselves, but in terms of others, and from that bridge into the understanding of the otherhood when we're doing business, because once we begin to do business, we become part of reality, and there we will deal with others on a daily basis. And that's where the next step of our progression journey will take us. But the core essence in everything we do, no matter what we do, it's about mastery. It's about learning to deal with energy in the proper way. And it's about evaluating all of our mistakes so we can learn from them, so we can activate the higher levels of the negative side of our experiences, because everything is an opposition that transforms energy, or everything is a polarity that has its positive version of something. So if we experience the negative, we can transform it into positive. We can take the weaknesses and turn them into strengths. We can take the threats and turn them into opportunities. And that's the foundational idea with the SWOT analysis, that you have the weaknesses and the threats. But if you learn to turn your weaknesses into strengths, the strengths will ensure that all the threats becomes opportunities because you know how to deal with it. And then you'll only be left with opportunities and strengths. That is part of mastery of reality, because you're dealing with what is there. You're seeing it as it truly is. And you're not just doing in mindful observation where you pretend, if I just ignore what is there and I don't have an emotional response to it, then it is not there really. Yes, that's when it comes to your own feels. But when it comes to reality and surroundings and other people, that mechanism doesn't work there. It determines how you behave in the situation, but it does not take away the threat of the situation. But the way you assess the threat is in mindfulness, and the way you respond to the threat is also in mindfulness. And that's where I differ from most of the Buddhist monks, because I did the warrior lineage. And once you have done that, you have assessed your enemy, the weaknesses, the strengths, what they have, what's going on there, and then you deal with it, and then you transform it, and then you turn it into a purified state. You're literally taking the enlightenment dynamics of yourself and work with it in terms of the otherhood that is in front of you if that otherhood is inclined to want to do the same thing. Because if they don't want to be transformed, you will not have a chance anywhere to do so, and they will clearly make it so. They will literally just put their sword down in front of them and say no, and then they'll turn away. But at least that's a solution too. Then you know that enemy is not ready for transformation. That thing I'm dealing with there is not interested in what I have to offer, and therefore we segregate. And that is good and fine too. Then that will be dealt with in a later cycle where they perhaps have learned more about what they're actually supposed to do as living existences within the reality and the universal cycles that we are part of. Thank you.